All right, hello, Programming 12. We're going to start working on making our platformer games a little more interesting. As we left it, we have a block walking around on other blocks. So we'd like to start bringing in some textures and then also making different kinds of terrain so that you can interact with springs that bounce you up and ice blocks that you will slide across and all the other kind of fun details of platformer games. We're going to start with just basic terrain. So what you see here will not require another class. We can build it all using just an FBox and just setting FBox properties and attaching appropriate images. I've uploaded a bunch of images to Teams. They come from the Super Mario World game from the Super Nintendo. Feel free to use other textures if you want, but no requirement to do so. You can borrow the textures we have, and the ones that you'll see me using in this video are all taken from the ones that are on Teams, so feel free to make use of those. Okay, so yeah, so here's what I got. I'll just run it. We have here's our player, and we're landing on this platform, and here we are walking along. Our player still looks pretty boring, but we have a few kind of interesting looking blocks now. Our jumping's a little bit high, but I'm not going to worry about that. Character rolls, again, not going to worry about it. We're going to focus on the terrain. So you'll notice that the stone blocks, to start off with, that's sort of our ground, and we can walk on the ground, and things look fine. They're not really too different or interesting. You'll notice that, though, I can slide on these, ice blocks, though. They slide very swiftly, and it looks like I am a little bit, slippery, sliding and stuff. So that's fun. And then we got a tree trunk, and it's not quite done. There's going to be more to it. There'll be a tree-like platform that goes on the top there, and of course, you'll notice that I can pass through it. It's almost like it's in the background. So we'll take a look at the requirements here. I think we can do that pretty easily. Oh, hello. Yeah, there's me editing stuff. So we have a few basic terrain things from the checkpoint. We have ground, that's my stone blocks. You can make them look however you want. You might want to set the friction a bit higher than normal just to make it differentiated from ice blocks a little bit. And attach some image. I'm using that stone block. The trampoline, that's going to be a spring, a bouncy thing. It's going to have a high restitution, so when you jump on it, it will bounce you up nice and high. The ice terrain, again, you're going to attach an image to it. It's going to be low friction, so you can slide across it. We'll later have a spike. That will just mostly look different, but we'll talk about the set name property so that we can figure out if we touch a spike later on. And then a tree is just sort of a word I chose because the tile set that I have, like the most obvious one is the tree platform. Some kind of multi-part terrain where there's many different images from the tile set that you'll need to code in to make that work nicely. So let's take a look. Later on we'll talk about fancy terrain, but that'll be in another video. So let's go and look and see how we're making these things happen. So first of all, actually, while I'm in Chrome, let's look at the image. So you'll see that I just have different colors that will code in a different kind of terrain. So black is just going to be regular ground. Cyan is going to be ice, and then this light brown is the tree trunk, and then I have sort of different colors for the different tiles of the tree. The tree will sort of have the intersection with the tree trunk. It'll have just a flat piece, and it'll have end caps as well, and each of these is a different color. I might make a separate video that'll just show how you might do it with a single color. But just sort of the different tiles being separate colors is probably fairly easy to use. Do make sure you note what colors you're using carefully. There is an color picker tool here. If you click on it, you'll get that color, and you can double click, and you can sort of, I don't know if I can zoom in, you can kind of see what that color hex code is, and make sure to carefully code that into your program so you're reading in the right color. The number one problem I find in this project, at least at this stage, is just getting the wrong color. So save it as a PNG. That'll help prevent the colors from shifting. If you are having trouble, if for some reason the colors not being loaded correctly, do open up the PNG you have, maybe in a different program. If you're on the desktop computers here, you could use Paint 3D, for example, and just check and see what those colors are, just to double check. That's a good step to take if you are wondering why they're not loading. So let's go look at the code here. So I'll show you an example of how I'm loading in the black pixels, the blue pixels, and the brown pixels, and then I'll let you take it from there. Okay, so here we go. Come back over here. So here's all my colors I've coded in. You can see the green I was just looking at, left green. I don't know, not great names, but we just need our palette of colors to load in the levels properly. Of course, I'll need images, so I'm going to load all my terrain. Again, these are available on Teams, and here I have, I've just downloaded them all. So feel free to grab the ones that you want. And yeah, here we go. So we got ourselves our for loop. Here's where we're loading the terrain. I have my load world function. So in addition to, here I make my general F box and place it in the right space. I set it to static by default. But here we got ourselves the way we load different types of things. So you can see I have an if statement to see, hey, if it's black, I load a stone block. If it's cyan, I load an ice block, and so on. What makes them different is really their properties. So for example, I'm attaching different images and and make sure those images are actually loaded before. I find another problem I see a lot of students run into. So I just move this down. Another problem I find students running into is they will call the load world function first, and they will then load the images afterwards. That won't work very well. So that's the story there. For the properties, things like setting friction for the ice block, and the stone block will be important. Notice that I've jacked up the friction on the stone blocks so that it feels different when I'm walking on the ice blocks. Just setting the ice block to 0 does, do well, but then the stone blocks are too slippery for them to feel like stone. So just jack that up. Important thing to know, I am setting the name for each of these. The set name function is really important. So do set the name for all the different terrains. That'll come in handy later when we're doing a spike block. We'll look at how we can make blocks dangerous, and so you'll have to set the name for all the different blocks so that we can see if they have a collision with a spike or lava or whatever. And if you only set it for some blocks and not others, you might get a null pointer exception, so be careful about that. Another property to mention is the set sensor property. Set sensor is very handy. It turns a block into sort of a ghost. You know what I mean? Like you can pass through it. It also puts it graphically in the background, and so that this image will sort of appear behind other blocks. And it will still work to check for collisions, which is why it's called set sensor. But effectively, we can make sort of background terrain. So things that are mostly for decoration, like the tree trunk, you don't really interact with it at all, but it's there to make the tree look cool. So that's good. So I'm going to continue working on this. I'm going to make some more if statements for the other kinds of terrain, and I will be excited to make that tree happen as well, like the platforms along the top. And again, if you want to, you can kind of code those in any way you want to have happen. Okay, so again, the criteria is on Teams. You can take a look at all those properties that you need to include in the document, in addition to what are the terrains we're looking for. Okay, good luck, everybody. Thank you.